So we're going to go ahead and jump into it. Let's me just check out the chat box, see how we're doing here, if we had any questions. All right, very good. Oh, good. Okay. Awesome. We got some people participating, Catherine and Carmen. All right, very good. I love it. Lizzie, Caitlin, excellent. All right, very good. Keep it coming, guys. Very good, because that's my interaction with you. Okay. So let's first start off with this one. This is one of my favorite lines here. Being busy sometimes equals lazy thinking. And it's not because we're lazy. It's not because you're lazy. It's because the society in which we live in. And let me give you a great example here. Let's say you go to your local coffee shop. Okay, I got a coffee today here at the airport. All right, so I go to my local coffee shop and I run into somebody. Hey, Sarah, how's it going? How you doing? Right? What's the first thing we usually ask? How are you doing? How are you doing? Hey, how are you doing? Oh, I'm doing great, right? And then she shares how she's doing. And then it's almost like I'm listening to her, but I'm not really. I'm just waiting till she closes her lips just for half a second. And then I'm going to do what? I'm going to just let her know everything that I'm doing, right? I mean, it's kind of like, oh, that's great. And I'm not even really listening. I'm just like, oh, well, let me tell you what I'm doing. And then I'm like, oh, we're doing this and this. And I'm going back to school to get my MBA and then get my real estate license. And I'm also going to, compete in these marathons. And it's like, we share this and almost like it becomes a competition of busyness. And I see this happening, whether it's on social media. And by the way, that's another thing I can talk about later. Spend as little time on social media as possible. And there's psychological, reasons for that, but just the level of comparison that we start to get into, this kind of only further creates this, more doing. But this whole thing is then I feel this sense of I've got to be doing something. And I wrote a blog post a little while back on my website just called Innate Busyness, and how we've kind of grown up with this feeling of I got to do something. I've got to stay busy. And sometimes that's from when we were a child, right? Your parents might have said to you, or your uncle or aunt or grandparents, hey, what are you doing? Hey, keep yourself busy. What? You don't have anything to do? I'll give you something to do, right? And so we've kind of taken that, and then now we just kind of magnified that. And then now with the pressures of time, where we just want to keep going. So we really got to get a better sense of what our priorities are. But now, what does this lead to then? Well, this leads to this right here. And we have two choices. We can either have better thinking or we can have more effort. When we apply more effort, when we think to ourselves, okay, I want to increase my sales. I want to get more people in here. I've got some buildings that need to get leased out. So I want to, got to get up earlier, got to make more dials, got to stay later. And that might be true initially. That might get you a certain level of result that you're looking for, but it might not be sustainable. And that's where I talk about the ceiling of diminishing returns, whereas we can put in more effort, but at some point or another, the more effort that we're putting in, the result, it caps out. And then we hit this ceiling, the ceiling of diminishing returns. So now how do we break through the ceiling? It's not more effort, but it's what? Better thinking. And better thinking, that's what we're on the call here today. How do we plan better? How do we prioritize better? How do we stay focused? How do we block our time? That's what we're going to be talking about today. Because when you think about some of the most successful people in America today, whether it's, you think somebody uber successful like a Jeff Bezos or Warren Buffett, or somebody that, that's very successful and maybe not as successful as them, just somebody who's done well, typically they're not probably running around keeping themselves busy. They're more, strategy. They're really applying that better thinking. And that's kind of what we want to apply as well in our lives. So this better thinking versus more effort, when we don't have better thinking, we just have the more effort. It leads us to the fallacy of doing. And I've been in this fallacy of doing for years. And sometimes I still catch myself in this fallacy of doing. And these are the false beliefs that the fallacy of doing states. The more I do, the more I'm worth. Anybody can relate to that? I was going to say show of hands, but I can't even see your hands. Right? Or I feel guilty when I'm not doing something. I know that one as well. It's kind of like I feel a sense of guilt, and this is just me speaking, is when I'm not doing something, I feel like, oh man, I should be doing something right now. And then I hope it's worth it in the end. So some of the kind of the thoughts that we kind of have ourselves and these are the false thoughts that kind of leads us back into that realm of just busyness. And why I don't like busyness is because the harder we just keep ourselves busy, the less we actually think. So the more that I just keep myself occupied with something, the less I actually think, plan, and prioritize. Okay? So that's the fallacy of doing. Now, where does the fallacy of doing lead us? Well, it leads us to this right here. Overcommitted, overextended, and then overwhelmed. I have a picture here. This is what happens when we don't plan and prioritize our life. What happens is this compound effect is when we start something, we start off working on something, okay? And then, to solve this, I got to bring this in. And then to solve this, we got to move into a bigger house. And then now we have, this. And then now we have got this. And all these things start to compound. And so now, just like the picture is, we tried to solve a very simple equation. And then now we had to just completely the complexity that our lives get. Okay. And that happens at times, right? The complexity, but really our job then is to do the hard thinking and to try to make our lives simple. And that's a key thing, is hard thinking. There was a quote that I had by Steve Jobs, and apparently I don't have it anymore. But he talked about, being able to do, I'll just kind of paraphrase it here. Oh, here it is. So Steve Jobs says this. Obviously, Steve Jobs, if you're an Apple product, sure, probably some of you have an iPhone, right? Or an iMac. He says that's been one of my mantras: focus and simplicity. Simple can be harder than complex. You have to work hard to get your thinking clean to make it simple. But it's worth it in the end, because once you get there, you can move mountains. We're going to learn more about how Apple became one of the most successful companies when Steve Jobs went back there in the late 1990s. So awesome. Overcommitted, overextended. All right. And this is one of my other favorite lines here, guys. And this is something I got to remind myself as well. Doing something unimportant well does not make it important. And sometimes if I don't prioritize, and prioritization, I think of it as a daily process. And when I don't prioritize, and I come off something, let's say I get pulled into something. I got to put out a fire. I get pulled into the whirlwind of activities. I go and I do that, and I come back, and I don't select what my priorities are. I choose the path of least resistance. So then I might say, oh, well, let me just answer some emails. And then boom, 50 minutes goes by. And then I only have an hour, 2 hours left of work. And so I didn't really use my time properly. Okay. So doing something unimportant well does not make it important. This is a great activity to keep in mind. All right. So let's keep moving here. All right. Now, I'm going to ask you, we're going to be out this webinar giving you attitudes, behaviors, and skills. So ABS, attitudes, behaviors, and skills. Anytime you want to increase your level of performance, your level of productivity, just think it's ABS. It's either probably my attitude, my mindset, the behavior that I'm doing, my daily behaviors, what are my habits, right? Or is it a skill set? Do I need to learn a new skill set, right? So it's probably either one of those things: attitudes, behaviors, and skill set. Now, initially, when we're faced with that, we want to grow. Let's say you want to grow your business. You want to grow, your take homes. You want to start to now try to get in that upper level, of top producer. All right. Initially, there's that fear there. There's that fear and uncertainty, just as you can see on the screen. We've got one of two choices. One is we can take courage and we can go forward. And being courageous actually means taking action even though you are scared. One of my great definitions I love. So when you take courage, you just take it every day, taking action even though you're scared, okay? And then if I fear or have some type of, I don't know about this, or I don't know if I could ask for that proposal, or I don't know if I could go talk to that client, then I tend to procrastinate. And Mel Robbins, a colleague of mine, she does a great job on the 5-second rule. And it's a video worth watching on YouTube. She talks about, 5 seconds, our brain only has 5 seconds, and then boom, the opportunity is gone. So it's a great little 5-minute video you can watch later on. But I just want to put this out here as we jump into it. So now we're going to apply the better thinking. How do we do it? Boom. One of the ways here is the 80-20. And that's where where it is a small amount creates the greatest result. So 20% of our effort yields 80% of the result. And just like I said earlier, I said, 80% of the time of the clothes you wear, 80% of the time the clothes you wear come from only 20% of your wardrobe. And it might be 80% of the revenue comes from 20% of your clients, 20% of your clients. So you can think about this. And so looking throughout our day, what is that effort that I'm putting forth that's giving my 80% result? Is it in the morning when I get going from like the hours of 9 to 11, when I make a couple key calls, when I have a couple key meetings? Is that the 20% effort that's giving my 80% result? So you want to be starting to think about that The question I'm going to ask, or it's going to be in the slide later on, it's a great question to frame for this, is think about this. And you can just put some answers in the chat box there. But if you only worked 4 hours a day, you could only work 4 hours a day. And let's say your company was going to still pay you the same and you're going to still make the same commission and things like that. If you only worked 4 hours a day, what would you do? And I really want you to think about that. What would you do? And then also you can make a little list. What would you start to then delegate? What would you ask for help? What would you try to make a system or a process? And that type of thinking it's a great question to ask yourself, from here on out, because it'll start to help you prioritize. It'll start to help you identify, okay, what is that 20% effort that's going to give me that 80% result? Because out of a typical work day, I really want to try to discover that. Now, getting back to Steve Jobs, like I said, I'm sure some of you, probably 70% of the people on the call here today, have some form of Apple product. You either have an iPhone or a MacBook, something like that. Steve Jobs applied this same rule, right? Remember the quote I just read to you? He talked about focus and simplicity. And that's where the 80-20 comes into apply. When he went back to Apple in the late 1990s, the company was not doing good. It was trying to do way too much. It was trying to move 100 things an inch rather than 3 things a mile. Steve Jobs came back to Apple, and they had something crazy like 350 projects on the table that they were working on. They were in R&D, and they were trying to, really create some type of momentum. He comes back and he cuts like all of them except for 10. And what does it do? It applies an immediate level of focus, a great level of focus. And then what happens? Boom, we get the iPod. So now we can, instead of having to buy a whole CD, you just can buy that one song that you want, right? Remember those days when you had to buy like the $12.99 CD and you're like, I really just wanted 1 or 2 songs. And then boom. So he totally revolutionizes the way music is sold. What does he do? Boom, comes up with the iPhone. Totally transforms how we use cell phones. So you can start to see these things take place, and how he's had great impact with books and being able to have books, and read them just electronically. And so, and then what happens to Apple? Apple becomes one of the most profitable companies in the world because their ability to focus. So that was an example on a macro level. You can have it the same on a micro in terms of your level as well. Thinking to yourself, okay, what is it that I need to focus? What is it that some of these things that kind of get in the way of really my 20% effort that I really want to see that can really move the needle? Okay. So you can put that in the chat box there. If you only worked 4 hours a day, what would you do? What would your activities be? All right. So like we said, 80-20 rule, 80% of happiness comes from 20% of the time. 80% results come from 20% of effort. Let's talk about the first one. 80% of happiness comes from 20% of the time. That might be, 80% of your happiness comes from 20% of your time. That might be like in the morning when you get that, when it's like nobody's up in the house and you maybe get that first cup of coffee, and that's like, 20 minutes or so, and everybody starts to get up and get crazy. Or it might be your wine maybe at the end of the night. I don't know. Okay. So it's perhaps something like that. All right. This is a great quote that I love. The things which are most important don't always scream the loudest. And it's our job to make prioritization a process and a habit. Prioritization, we think of prioritization and planning. We think of, long-term. Okay, I've got a plan for the month, the quarter, the year. But no, it's got to be every week, and it's got to be almost every day. The more that we can kind of compartmentalize and think, okay, what am I doing now? In these next 2 hours, the more that we can kind of really think like that, the better we all will be in the long run, because we'll really start to maximize our effort and we'll be in the present moment. A lot of times people aren't effective because their mind is so fixated on other things. They're worried about other things. They're worried about the outcome of something. They're fearful of something. They've got anxiety around something. And that's all in the future. A talk I gave last week in Orlando. Last week I was in Orlando, Tampa, and then Virginia. And then this week I'm in DC, in Indiana. Tomorrow, next 2 days, I'll get to do some leadership development training with a group of managers on healthy conflict and effective communication. So I'm looking forward to that. But last week I did a talk on how to be effective. And I talked about a big part of effectiveness, and this ties into what we're talking about here, is being able to get out of our head. Being effective is a daily process, getting out of our head. And I had people, think of one area they want to be effective at. So it might be, okay, they're going into a sales meeting. Okay, they're going to have a difficult conversation with somebody. Whatever it is, they would pick one thing and they would write down 2 C's, concerns and commitments. So you'd write down, what are my concerns? My concerns are blank. Okay, I'm committed to blank. And when you write down your concerns, one or two things will happen. One is you'll find ways on how to overcome them, or two, you'll be able to let them go. And that's the whole idea, is managing your concerns. So manage your concerns. You either do nothing, right? They just live in your head. They take up valuable real estate, right? No pun intended, real estate, okay? Or you identify them and you're able to let them go, okay? So the things which are most important don't always scream the loudest. It's being able to identify that and get out of our head and be very effective. All right, so just some bonus material there for you guys. All right, another way in terms of prioritization, how do we prioritize, is to think differently about your work. A lot of times people still think hours. Oh, I worked 50 hours a week last week. Oh, I worked 60 hours a week last week. And that's great. You know, you got a great work ethic and you're doing that. It's fantastic. But I want to challenge you, instead of thinking hours, because when we think of hours, we think of more just time and effort. I want you to think in terms of priorities, because priorities, you can write this down in terms of value and impact, And that's really, as the environment that we're in, with all the technology, the disruptive technology that's happening, the changes, the innovation, all these wonderful things that are happening to make the quality of our life go up. It's wonderful. But then there comes this point where we have to really be thinking not just time and effort, but value and impact. And that's really what the distinction here is. Instead of thinking 9 to 5, oh, I work 9 to 5 today. No, think of 3 to 5. I did what were my 3 priorities that I did today? What was the impact and the value of that? And one way you can think about this is RGI I have is revenue, growth, and impact. You know, looking at your daily priority. So you've got maybe a list there. And by the way, I don't like a to-do list, and we're going to talk about that. People plan sometimes with like using a to-do list, and I don't like a to-do list because people typically have anywhere from 10 to 15 items. And by the way, I've been doing this seminar. It used to be, I used to work for a seminar company as an independent contractor, and it was managing multiple projects, objectives, and deadlines. And when I left the seminar company, I left as the #1 trainer ranked on this topic. Very simply, time management, productivity, how do we be effective? And so I've constantly modified it and changed it and stuff. But what I discovered over the hundreds of times I did the seminar, different managers, owners, people had a to-do list, and they had like 10 to 15 items on there. Now, I don't like a to-do list because here's why. Typically, when we have a to-do list, we start with what is the what? The easiest, right? We start with what is the easiest. And we not only start with what is the easiest, but also too is we set ourselves up for failure because we have unrealistic expectations. Something you want to write down. One of the fastest ways to be in burnout at your job or just even at life is to have unrealistic expectations. So unrealistic expectations, it's a big no-no. All right. So if we have a list of like 10 items, let's say I'm working on a list of 10 items, I might have a very productive day. Let's say from an output standpoint, I might be cranking away on my list. I might even eat at my desk, right? Get one of those, was it like healthy choice you put in the microwave at work, right? And then you come back and you eat and you're still doing work, okay? And you think you're trying to get everything done. And let's say you get done 6 out of 10, right? So how many do you have left? So you get done 6, but you still have 10 that you wanted to do. So how many do you have left? Very quickly on the math, let's see what you got. 4. Okay, Jenny, thank you. All right, everybody, we're going to refer to Jenny. Okay, there we go. We're starting to get some answers. Yeah. Jenny's fast on the uptake there. All right, very good. So now we've got 4. Now, excellent. We've got 4, but so what does the human mind focus on? What's done or what's not done? The human mind focuses on not what's done, but the human mind focuses on what's not done. So therefore I leave at the end of the day still feeling what? Overwhelmed, overworked. And I don't realize, I don't see my impact. I don't see the growth. I don't see any of that. I just see what's not done. So therefore, now I didn't include this in the slides, because I'm maybe getting into the weekly strategy sheet, but you can plan your day just by using just the 4 priorities, just by doing 4, okay? And I can send this to Sarah as well. I like to have a running list where I write down everything from my head. I do like a data dump, just get it all out. And then my daily priorities, I only take 3 or 4. And when I add them all up, I put a time next to each thing. And when I add each of those up, there should be no more than 4 hours. Now you say, why is that, Eric? I'm working 8 hours. Well, it goes back to my question earlier. If you only work 4 hours a day, what would you do? And it also goes back to, you're going to get interrupted. You're going to get phone calls. You're going to get text messages. You're going to have to put out fires. You're going to have a client that you thought a deal was just lock solid and everything was all set. And then now you got to put in more due diligence. Okay. So you're going to get, those things are going to come up, but you're going to start to identify, this is going to be the process to really start to help you prioritize. Okay, so you pick 3 or 4, and I like to put the outcome in action. What's the outcome you want, and then the action, and then put the time frame up there. Okay, this will help you in terms of thinking of what are your 3 to 5 priorities. Fantastic. All right, another way to prioritize is something called the domino effect, and discovering what is our lead domino. Now, dominoes are fascinating. And why is that? Because domino, you apply just a little bit of energy, and it's amazing the chain reaction of what it can knock over. I'm going to show you like a 2-minute and 30-second video here on why this is so powerful. And when I'm showing you the video, I want you to be thinking of energy. Energy, what is something that I can do that then is going to give me a great return on my energy, that I can start, that's eventually then I'm going to really start to reap the rewards from it. Okay, so what is something that you can do, something small that then can knock over something bigger, and then even something large? All right.
Everybody knows about playing with dominoes, but what you may not know is that a domino can knock over another domino, which is about 1.5 times larger. So what I have here is a chain of dominoes. Each one is 1.5 times larger than the previous one. And the smallest domino is about 5 millimeters high and 1 millimeter thick. And I will carefully place it. And there are 13 dominoes. And the largest domino, it weighs about 100 pounds and is more than 1 meter tall. Ready? Ooh. That was 13 dominoes. If I had 29 dominoes, the last domino would be as tall as the Empire State Building. Here we go. What's the physics going on here? Well, every time you stand up a domino, you lift it against gravity. And that stores some of gravitational potential energy in the domino. And you only have to put a little bit of push to get it to that tipping point. And then you get all back again when it falls over. And that's more than enough energy to knock over the next domino, which releases even more energy. So it turns out the amplification in this series of 13 dominoes is about 2 billion. So we put in a little tiny bit of energy at the beginning, and we get 2 billion times as much out at the end. But of course, we put all that energy in by lifting these dominoes and standing them up again. So that's a kind of chain reaction. You trigger it, and more energy comes out. More and more energy is released each step. Let's see it in slow-mo.
All right. You guys like that music? Thumbs up, yeah? All right, very good. Guys, we're just a little over halfway there. So in terms of our webinar today, very excited that we've gone, you know, it's cranking and rolling. And so what I want you to do is just go ahead and stand up, take a stretch break, do something, get yourself ready to go. If you've got any type of questions, I'm going to take a look at the chat box, but I want to keep this rolling. But just kind of just get a chat. I mean, get a little stretch break there, and then kind of sit on back down. All
Eric,
right.
I wanted to point your attention to a question that came up a while ago, and it's companies still value the midnight oil burners. Many of us sell hours and are evaluated by utilization rates. How does an employee scale back busy hours when that's part of the culture of the industry and in business in general?
Gotcha. That's a great question. Initially, it's kind of, you know, that's a multifaceted question. One thing is I'd look at is, you know, what is, let me see if I can go to that question. Do I have that in the chat box? Or no?
Yep. It's from earlier, 11:18, if you have the time.
Oh, okay. I just have 11:50 a.m. All right. Well, I'll just I'll just go off what you shared me. So companies value the person that, the midnight oil burners, this and that. And to me, that's, that's still kind of that old mantra, more effort as opposed to better thinking. I would see one is this. One is, how am I evaluated? Is it based on, the hours, it is actual hours that I have to do? Or is it more of the dollar amount? And can I sell more in less time? And that's kind of the question I would start to ask myself. And then it might be too, because see, sometimes too, bosses, just the politics maybe of an organization. If a boss doesn't see you there all the time, if you're not, like, it used to be like you had to be the first one there, the last one to leave to really, move up in the ranks. So I would look at it too, and maybe have that conversation with my boss or somebody else, maybe who's doing my evaluation, just being like, here's my approach is to really try to be strategic with my time, to really try to expand my client base and increase my revenue, my sales, but do it in the most effective and efficiently way as possible. And then see, would you agree? And then say, oh yeah, we agree. Okay. So I would try to get their buy-in, because if you start to be more strategic with your time and they see that you're not there, then you can have some of those ramifications. It's also, the flip side of that, to give you a couple of other analogies, like sometimes people, like lawyers, they charge like an hourly fee, right? So it's like, okay, we charge this, for an hour, this, and all these things get your hour amount up. And that can be good for a while, but then you're eventually going to hit a ceiling of how much you can charge for an hour. So instead of charging for an hour, you're charging what's the impact, what's the value. And then when you look at it from that perspective, you're able to charge, some lawyers are able to charge a great deal more, just to kind of give you an example of that. Did I answer that person's question enough, or can?
If not, they'll submit a follow-up. There's a couple other questions that have rolled in as well.
Now I see them. Yeah, this is great. Awesome. So 12:37. Now we had questions over here. Oh, the ladies in New York City. Hey, ladies in New York City, how are we doing? Could you please explain what you meant with get out of here? Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of times in life, we're in our head. Should I do this? Like, we're in a meeting, for example. Somebody's talking like, oh, do I, I've got a question about something, but I don't really want to ask a question. I don't want to look like I'm an idiot. I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want to ask a question because I don't want to think that I'm challenging my boss. All these conversations that live in our head. And so therefore, this is preventing us from being effective, because we're not in reality. We're in what? We're in our head. And that's when I say being effective is a daily process of getting out of our head. It's a daily process of writing down our concerns. So just before you go into a meeting, just try this, guys, everybody that's on the call, before your next big appointment or for your next big sales call or going to something, anything that you're worried about, write down all your concerns, put them in a question mark, just get them out of your head, and then write down what you're committed to being. I'm committed to being effective. I'm committed to being a great listener. I'm committed to being a top-notch sales professional, whatever it is that you're committed to being. And then what happens is when something goes awry, you're concerned. You're not even going to be worried about it. You're just going to be so focused on the commitment that you've made. And that's the whole idea. Our head in terms of our concerns, our fears, our worries, and let's just focus on what we want. So when we acknowledge our concerns, we're much more likely to be who we want to be, as opposed to being held back by worry, self-doubt, all these things that kind of get in the way. So did I answer that question? Is it Jaffe? So hopefully if they let me know, Jaffe, just a thumbs up or no for more clarification. Awesome. I love the questions coming in. And anything else, Sarah, that you saw?
Yeah, there's one more. It says, I think it's addressing the how do you work less when you're compared to the midnight oil burners. And it says that can cause tension with coworkers that don't approach life like that. I agree with it and try to live it, but 80% of the coworkers and bosses use the old school approach.
Yeah, that's a great, I'm reminded by a colleague of mine, Richard Koch, C-O-C-H. He wrote the book 80-20, and he was very much in that same position, a consulting firm. He ended up leaving the consulting firm and just starting his own practice. So with that being said is, maybe it's something that, you might have to get creative in terms of to really be, to work with. Or maybe, you look and see, okay, what are some other organizations that really value, new ideas and value better thinking? It's the old school of just, we've got more manpower and this and that, to me, just, I'm still kind of like, it's It's a tough situation to be in, but I'll give you a great example. It's like Kodak in New York when they were going bankrupt. I think they had like 50-some thousand employees, and they had a lot of, all this stuff that we really needed, right? Inventory, all these things. And then you had a company like that same year out in California, had like a $1.2 billion market share, market cap space, and that was like Instagram, and that had like 12 employees. And that's a great example of what I'm saying, whereas it doesn't, more effort, more people, all that stuff doesn't sometimes necessarily make the end of the day. So getting back to the question is, if you can't find creative ways to work more effectively, then maybe you look at maybe seeing what other options are out there. But I would be, to me, it wouldn't be fun to work for the man that's like always, to me, that seems like there might be micromanaging going on. It might be a lack of trust. I mean, there might be some other issues that are taking place there as well, Oh, thank you. Perfect. From Sarah in NYC. All right. Very cool. Very good. All right. What else do we have, Sarah?
I have one other question that came in through the Q&A, and it says, how do you move up if you feel like you're working with only men who have sons? I've read that sometimes it's best to find a sponsor with daughters as they have greater changes of realizing your potential and may sponsor you. Correction, I do work with only men, and I feel like there is not an opportunity to move up, even though I am working towards doing so.
Okay. So if I understand you correctly, so working with all men and you feel like you've hit a ceiling, is that right? Like you can't move up? Is that what the question is? Because I can't see it.
Yes,
okay.
That's correct.
Yeah, I would say, hey, if you can't break through a ceiling, you go somewhere else. I mean, that'd be my initial. Now you have to obviously evaluate that and do that. But if you feel like you're not, it's kind of like if I'm in some sandbox and I'm playing and I'm only so effective, then I go in another sandbox. That's the way I kind of look at it. Is I want to be around other people that have the mindset of growth, or want to learn, want to have fun, want to have passion and purpose, and bring that to their work. So yeah, if you feel like you're hitting a ceiling, I would definitely be looking at my other options. Now, easier said than done. I mean, that's something that requires a lot of effort and time in terms of to think of and to strategize. So
okay.
To get back on track. All right. Thank you. Okay. So should we get back on track?
Absolutely.
Okay. Very good. So what is our lead domino? So we took a look at that. Thank you guys for the questions. You guys can keep them coming in, and just let me know, Sarah, if they pop up. I'm going to close the chat box. So domino effect, right? It's another great way that we can prioritize. Here it is. Here's the question I was talking about, guys, or ladies. If you only worked 4 hours a day, what would you do? It's a great question to write down and let your mind think about it. And sometimes you'll get great ideas, ladies, even like when you're like out walking, going for a walk. Sometimes I get the great ideas just being in the shower. I don't know what it is, just but being around or being in water, my mind is relaxed. So if you only work 4 hours a day, what would you do? This really helps you on that journey of being 80-20. Okay. Really, what's that 20% effort that's going to give me that 80% results? All right. And like I said earlier, prioritization is a process. This is a 1 hour webinar. It's not going to solve all your problems, but hopefully it's going to be the start of something big. Oh, what is this? This is the weekly strategy sheet. All right. Now, sir, do they have this ahead of time? Or
no, they'll have it tonight. I'll send it to them here in a couple hours. Okay,
very cool. Very cool. So this is how I plan, ladies. And this is something that it kind of incorporates what we've already talked about, but I just want to kind of go over it. So on the top right, you'll see where it says week. So that's where I put the week. So this is the week of what, May 4th through May 9th? Is that right? May 5th?
May 6th.
Something like that. It's a week in May. So it's a week in May. And so celebrate. So in the top, so it's got 3 parts: celebrate, check in, and commit. So the celebrate is the left part. I love this part because this reminds us of our progress. It reminds us to think about what were our wins last week. What did we do well last week? So you write down 5 things. I like to put, I sprinkle in a couple personal things. So I do professional and personal. So I put that in there for celebrate. Like one of my wins last week is my wife and I were expecting our first child in November 10th. And it was so awesome to see the sonogram, the image and stuff, and how the baby's growing. So, hey, that's one of my wins, right? Because I put that right. Actually, that was like my top one. Everything else didn't matter. But anyway, so that was one of my first wins there. So here's the thing too, you just celebrate life. A lot of times we're not taking the time to celebrate life because we're so worried about the next thing. And if you did this weekly strategy sheet and you start to realize this, like initially when you do this, it might be like difficult for you to see what were your wins last week. And what's funny is because we're so fixated on the next thing. And while that's good to have focus and have ambition, to have drive, always, start to be able to look back and be thankful, to look back and see the progress that you've made, because that stimulates your confidence. So I always like to look back, and eventually, here's the goal. Here's the goal, ladies, is what I'm celebrating. Also, you'll see in the next column will be in connection with my weekly priorities. So there should start to be, like week 2, week 3, as you do this, there should start to be some type of alignment, some type of synergy between the celebrate column and the check-in column. So my weekly priorities, I start getting those done, and those start to fall right in alignment. All right. So the next thing is the check, and that's the weekly priorities. That's the question I was asking you. If you only worked 4 hours a week, what would you do? And this is it here. If I only could do 3 things this week, what would I do? So you might even further bring it to even a further micro question in terms of asking yourself, if I only worked 4 hours in this whole week, what would I do? And then you can write that down. And this is also going to force you to prioritize. It's going to force you to prioritize and force you to focus. And only keep it to 3, because the whirlwind of activities will come up. Other things will happen. And then the last column on the right, which is called the OKRs. Great book out there by John Doerr, Measure What Matters. And if we had more time, I would go deeper into this, but a great company out there called 23andMe. Some of you might have heard of it. My wife was the first one that told me about it. But what was really cool about it is Annie, the CEO, she's really grown this company by using this one strategy, OKRs. And it was her sister who turned her on to it. And so Measure What Matters. So she's in the book. She's also like in YouTube. It's like a 4-minute clip. If you just type in like Measure What Matters and then like plus 23andMe, it'll come up. Or if you just go to the website, she's one of the stories there. But really, here's what it looks like. It's very simple: objective and key results. So the objective is the what. What do you want to accomplish? It might be a monthly goal. It might be a quarterly goal. I like to keep it around monthly or quarterly. And then the key results you can put is the what. Is the how. How are we going to actually accomplish that? And then you would write down a couple things of how you would do that. So here's a sample objective. The objective for the sample one is establish a system for marketing and selling. I want to establish an outbound system that's going to really bring clients in. Okay, so number 1 is I want to integrate an email marketing software with a CRM, okay, to drive activities and lead generation. And then within that email marketing software, I want to launch 5 email campaigns. Number 2, I want to bring on somebody, commit one person to 12 hours a week so they can do emails and phone calls. Number 3, you might update the website and homepage for lead capture and creating 2 landing pages. All right. So just give you a couple ideas there. And the great thing about the OKRs is you write down your goals. You write down your goal, this like monthly goal or quarterly goal every week. So it keeps it top of mind. And that's probably the number one reason why people don't accomplish their goals is they write it down once, they think of it once, they go to a meeting once, they hear of it once. They might hear of it 2 or 3 times, but they don't write it down. And when you write it down and you keep writing it down on a weekly basis, it really sinks right in your memory. So that's the beauty of that. Awesome. And by the way, if you have any questions on this, feel free to just keep them to yourself. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. If you have any questions, feel free to answer, guys. I'm just having some fun. All right. Brings us to our focus question. Awesome. So this is great too. If I were with you ladies in person, I'd give each of you one of these as well. This is something I created for myself. And then I was like, more people could, maybe could benefit from this, but are you inventing things to do to avoid the important? When I'm not on the road speaking at associations, conferences, or working with different businesses, like next week I'll be working with a distribution center here in Indiana, their managers. When I'm not doing that, I'm at home, I'm thinking of new content, I'm writing, doing some videos. And sometimes, I'll be honest with you, sometimes I let myself procrastinate or sometimes I get distracted, okay? It happens. So I keep this on like a coaster for me so I can see it. So it's kind of like, Eric, are you inventing things to do to avoid the important? because it's very easy to just make up things. Oh, let me go do this. Let me just check some email. And then before you know it, I get off track. Another thing, let me just say this about email, because I'm not going to talk about email at length, but I want to put this in there, is I don't check my email first thing in the morning. I do not do that. I check my email later on. I know some of you might do that, when you're in bed on the nightstand, you just reach over. I don't like to do that. I really tell people not to do it because it's such a reactive activity. You don't even know what kind of day you're going to have. Your day is based on somebody else and what's in your inbox. I don't like that at all. I like to start my day off on the right foot. Start my day off, whether it's prayer, meditation, going for a walk, journaling, listening to music. I want to, maybe doing a plank like I did this morning at like 5 o'clock in the morning, just to kind of get my mental mind right. I want to start my day off on the right foot, because then when I start my day off and I'm feeling good about my day, then I'm much better to handle anything that comes at me. Okay, so start your day off doing something. A great book out there as well is by Hal Elrod. It's called The Miracle Morning, and he's written several different ones. I mean, he probably has one in your industry, Miracle Morning for real estate professionals within the industry. So that might be one to take a look at. But it's very important, because the first 20 minutes of your day has the impact to affect the next 5 hours. So you can have this on a little post-it note, the focus question, to keep us focused. And this also helps too. It'll help us overcome those levels of procrastination and perfectionism. Ooh, time blocking, great strategy. So this is my last 2 slides here, ladies, time blocking and the Pareto strategy. And they both go hand in hand. Time blocking, you can do it one of 2 ways. One is you can pick like a 3-hour chunk of time during your week. So the next week in May, you can say, okay, I got really something I really want to get done. So let me block off 3 hours of time, and I'm going to do it these 2 days, right? Or 1 day. And you'll be amazed at the quantity and the quality of your work, because you're solely locked in on that. And when I say block it off, I'm saying like no interruptions, no phone calls, no text messages. All right. We live in the age of distractions and interruptions. And sometimes a lot of these interactions are what I call self-inflicting distractions, right? We have the self-inflicting attention deficit disorder, where we'll be in line somewhere waiting for a coffee, and we have like 30 seconds or like 20 seconds. So what do? We just pull out our phone. We just start randomly checking our email. Just try to prevent yourself from doing this, because what's happening is our focus is getting fragmented every single time. So I love time blocking, right? So time blocking, it might be those big things, 2 or 3 hours. Now you might say, Eric, I don't have 2 or 3 hours, but I still want to be able to keep my focus. And that's okay. And that's where this strategy comes in. This is the Pomodoro strategy. Pomodoro means tomato. And this came from a group of engineers, and they would work on a project to keep their focus. Is they would set a timer for 25 minutes, and then they would take a 5-minute break. And what this is doing, it's helped to train our brain to focus for short periods of time, and improves our attention span and concentration. This is key, because there's been some studies out there that show the average worker, the average professional worker in an office gets interrupted like every 11 minutes, which is crazy when you think about it. And sometimes, like I said, that's self-inflicting. Oh, I got a text message from my wife. Let me look at that. Or, oh, I got an email coming in. And sometimes we do that. So what I'll do is when I'm working from home, I will put my phone on airplane mode, so that way it blocks everything out. So if I got to work on something, if I'm going to write an article or a blog post, I usually try to do one once a week. I just did this one this week on healthy conflict, okay? And why that leads to greater levels of productivity. So when I wrote that blog, like, boom, I want to block out everything. I put my phone on airplane mode, and I'm locked in for like 50 minutes. So that really keeps me focused there. Awesome. All right. And before I leave you with my last 3 things, I want to see if we've got any questions coming in, because I believe we've got like 4 minutes left.
All right, we have a few questions. If you don't mind, I'll read them off to you. How do we stay focused with the amount of emails that must be kept up on? We are in business development. We need to be responsive and to keep up with what's going on.
Yeah, great question. So one of 2 things you can do is, one is you can kind of let people know, you can communicate to them, hey, if you ever need me, if it's ever like really urgent or important, please, by all means, pick up the phone and call me. I'd rather have somebody call me on the phone as opposed to them get like upset or pissed off at me because they didn't answer their email like in a timely fashion. So that's something I always tell people is call me or text me right away if there's something. The second thing you can do is start to check your email if you have to every top of the hour. And then maybe eventually you can able to scale it back. Like I try to check my email 2, maybe 3 times a day, and that's it. You know, what I found is the more that I check my email, the less productive day I have, because I just find myself, I'm like living in my inbox. Now, that might be different for, it all depends, but I would kind of try to, just try that out. And another thing too is when you go in and answer your emails, ladies, set a time for yourself, like 20 minutes, get in and get out. It's so easy. Email to me is like, it's such a distraction filled place. Cause then you get like, oh, look at this. Here's they're having a sale at Kohl's. What is it? Oh, look at this. Here's something about, my fantasy football team. Oh, okay. And like we get pulled in and we go down other avenues and we end up spending not 20 minutes, but like 50 minutes. So maybe every top, if you have to really check your email, every top of the hour, and then get in and get out. All right.
Okay. And then we had a comment come through when you were talking about time blocking. It says, this works really well. I put an agenda together of what exactly I need to do during my block, so I don't spend 80% of the time planning what I'm going to do during that time. Okay. How do you block time in an open workspace, and how do you say no interruptions without having to say it?
Yeah, fantastic. Great question. And this is what I've created. So I created a little thing here. I don't know, can you guys see this, Sarah? Mm-hmm. So it says stop, and it says deep work in progress. So this is like a little sign that I have. I just created this, and then I flip it around, come with solutions and questions. So you have to have some device that you can communicate to people. It might be that, or it might be that you put in earbuds, and then it lets people know, hey guys, when I have these earbuds in, I got to really crank on something. I got to get a deadline. If it can wait, by all means, just get me when I take out my earbuds. So you have to have some level, and this is especially true for open workspace, because sometimes open workspace, people think, oh, I can just go interrupt somebody at any time. And what happens is deep work is not happening. So you got to have some level. This is something I just created. You can get flags, you can get, headphones, but let people know sometimes you got to get cranking on something. Another strategy too, is you can break your day. I like to, get everybody in the office. Would be great if they agreed on something like, okay, hey, the hours of like 9 in the morning to 11, that's when we're all focused on our highest level of priorities, like with ourselves, perhaps, we're or that's the quiet time. And then from this time is more the interruption, interaction, collaboration time. So you can kind of, think like that, what would work for you as well. Please repeat what is on the green side. Okay. It says, come with solutions and questions. So like I'm allowing for people now to come and interrupt me. Another strategy is you might have like what our college professors used to have. They call it what? Office hours. So it was like, hey, come to me guys. If you have anything, come to me between the hours of 1 and 3. I'm all ears. If there's something even more important than that, then come see me before that. But really try to corral those interruptions are a great way. Our college professors did it. They had to grade papers. They had to do research. They had to write papers and write books. So one way to go.
One more question in here. Studies are showing that the most successful people make time for creativity. How do you incorporate creativity into your routine?
Absolutely. So you're going to some of you might laugh at this, but so I'm in the airport here, right? Fort Wayne. I told you that. So I just was going to the bathroom beforehand, and I saw this like 2E's winery in, one of the best wineries in Indiana. So I was like, oh, that's awesome. I'm going to go there after I'm done with the webinar today. And you might think like, why, I should be doing this, or I should be going. And it's like, no, creativity comes from our mind and our ability to slow down and relax. So that's the first thing. So when in terms of making time for creativity is I've got to have the mental bandwidth. If I'm constantly going, my mind doesn't have the mental bandwidth to slow down and to create. So that's the first thing, is slow down and have the downtime to do that. Just block that off. That's just what's so important. The second thing is look for observations. Look for how you can combine things. Creativity is not so much coming up with just a completely new idea. Creativity might be, you're at a great restaurant and you're getting great service, and they did something there and you're like, oh my gosh, we can use that. We can incorporate that back at what we do. That's what creativity is, being able to see observations and connections, I think. And then you just, when you get in, and the third thing is this: when you get a great idea, write it down. Don't like, oh, that'll never work. Or, oh, somebody I think on the third floor tried that 5 years ago and that didn't work. Because your brain's going to try to stop you from doing that. So definitely write it down. All right. Awesome. Ladies, I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know what's the one thing that you're going to take out of here. Hopefully you've got more than one thing, but if you could just type that in.
And then I had one other question is, where can we find your blog?
Oh, you can find my blog, ericpapp.com. Let me see if I've got that pulled up here. Yes. So here is my website and then the blog. So I put something there every week. So let's see if it's gotta make sure because somebody else, I write it and then I give it to somebody to upload. Yeah. So they did upload. Okay. So does conflict impact productivity? So if you're having a hard time falling asleep at night, you can go ahead and read that, and it'll knock you right out. I'm just kidding. No, normally I try to make it entertaining as well when I write. So awesome.
Wonderful.
Awesome. And if I can be of service, guys, if any other questions, things that just don't, I mean, things that like, let me just shoot me an email. I'm usually pretty good within 48 or 24 hours. Just email me if you got a great question, is, you know, something like that. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I saw some of you were on LinkedIn. Would love to connect with you on there. So awesome. It's really, really cool.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And can you give them a copy, Sarah, of the slides? That's
Yes,
cool with me.
they will have a copy of the slides, a copy of the weekly strategy sheet. And there was one other thing you were going to send me that I made a note of, and I'll email you later for that. And I will send that out to everybody.
Awesome. And then also too, last but not least, special thanks to Sarah. Guys, ladies, make sure you thank Sarah and the Crew Network for bringing us together. That's what this is all part of.
Yeah,
so.
Thank you. Thank you everybody for your time today. And thank you, Eric. This is great tips. I know I made a sheet of notes. And I've got a few things I'm going to incorporate into my life as well, my work life and my personal life. And so this was fantastic. Ladies, later on today, you will have a copy of, like I said, the slides, the playback, and a copy of the evaluation. Please provide us your feedback, ideas for future webinar topics. I do read those and I take those to heart. So I enjoy, getting your feedback. And then have a productive rest of your day. I hope you guys all have something planned for this afternoon that you can accomplish.
3 wishes. Are they still there?
Yeah, they're still there.
Okay, 3 wishes I give every audience. I want to give this to you as well. May you have gratitude for your past, joy for your present, and hope for your future.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody.
All right, so thank you.